What if I told you that one of the greatest Jedi Masters in galactic history deliberately chose not to fight the Empire when the galaxy needed him most? Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Negotiator, the man who trained Anakin Skywalker, fought in the Clone Wars and defeated Darth Vader on Mustafar. By all accounts, he should have been leading the charge against Imperial tyranny, alongside Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and the growing Rebel Alliance. But he didn't. For nearly 20 years, while the Empire crushed entire worlds under its boot, Obi-Wan Kenobi sat in a cave on Tatooine, watching over a farm boy. And today we're going to explore why this wasn't cowardice or abandonment. It was the most strategically brilliant decision in Star Wars history. To understand Obi-Wan's choice, we need to understand what the Clone Wars did to him. This wasn't just a war, it was a systematic betrayal of everything the Jedi Order stood for, orchestrated by the very enemy they thought they were fighting. Imagine this. You've spent your entire life serving as a peacekeeper, and suddenly you're commanding armies, making life-or-death decisions for millions of clone troopers, and watching your closest friends die in battles that, unbeknownst to you, are being manipulated by a Sith Lord. And then comes Order 66. In a single moment, every clone trooper Obi-Wan had fought beside, every commander he'd trusted, every friendship he'd built over 3 years of warfare, turned their weapons on him. The Republic he'd served fell in a day. The Jedi Order was exterminated, and his own apprentice, the Chosen One himself, became the Empire's enforcer. But here's what makes Obi-Wan's trauma unique. He survived it all. He watched his entire world burn, fought his brother in all but blood, and left Anakin for dead on a lava planet. The psychological weight of that survival isn't just grief, it's survivor's guilt on a galactic scale. When we see him again in the original trilogy, he's not just older, he's fundamentally changed. The confident, quip-making general from the Clone Wars has become a hermit who speaks in riddles and seems almost mystically detached from the physical world. This isn't character development. This is what trauma does to a person. But Obi-Wan Kenobi wasn't just any traumatized war veteran. He was called the Negotiator for a reason. Even in his darkest hour, that brilliant strategic mind was still working. Think about what joining the Rebel Alliance would have meant in practical terms. First, the timeline. The Rebel Alliance as we know it didn't truly form until about 5 years before A New Hope. Before that, you had scattered resistance cells, some of which were more terrorist organizations than freedom fighters. Saw Gerrera's partisans, for example, were using tactics that even the mainstream rebellion found extreme. Obi-Wan would have known that premature action against the Empire would only lead to more suffering. Palpatine had spent decades preparing for this moment. He had contingency plans for contingency plans. A Jedi survivor leading a rebellion would have been exactly what the Emperor expected and wanted. Because here's the thing, Palpatine needed the Jedi to be villains in his story. The entire Imperial narrative was built on the idea that the Jedi were traitors who had tried to overthrow the Republic. A surviving Jedi Master leading armed resistance against the government would have validated that propaganda perfectly. But more importantly, Obi-Wan understood something that even the Rebel Alliance didn't fully grasp until much later. This war couldn't be won through conventional means. The Empire had the Death Star under construction. They had unlimited resources, a fanatically loyal military, and the support of much of the galaxy's population, who genuinely believed the Empire had brought peace and order. The only way to defeat the Empire was through the Force, through Luke Skywalker, through the fulfillment of the prophecy about bringing balance. Obi-Wan saw the bigger picture that others couldn't. This wasn't about military strategy, it was about destiny. This brings us to perhaps the most overlooked aspect of Obi-Wan's situation. He was one of only 2 people in the galaxy who knew the complete truth about Anakin Skywalker and Luke's parentage. Every day, for 19 years, Obi-Wan lived with the knowledge that Darth Vader, the Empire's greatest weapon, was Luke's father. He knew that somewhere in that mechanical suit was still the man he had trained, the hero of the Republic, the chosen one. But he also knew what Anakin had become. He'd seen the bodies of younglings in the Jedi Temple. He'd witnessed firsthand what the dark side could do to someone he'd loved like a brother. Now, imagine trying to navigate that psychological minefield while also being responsible for Luke's safety and training. How do you prepare someone to face their own father in mortal combat? How do you train them to possibly kill the person they might love most if they knew the truth? And looming over all of this was Palpatine himself, the man who had orchestrated the fall of the Jedi Order, who had turned Anakin, who had played a galactic chess game for decades and won every move. Obi-Wan knew that Palpatine would be expecting him to act, expecting him to train Luke, expecting him to make a move. So what does a master strategist do when his opponent expects every conventional move? He does nothing. He disappears. He lets his enemy think he's defeated. Broken, irrelevant, he plays the longest game possible. This wasn't abandonment. It was the ultimate sacrifice. Obi-Wan gave up his identity as a Jedi Knight, his role as a hero, his chance for glory or redemption, all to ensure that Luke would be ready when the time came. But there's an even deeper layer to Obi-Wan's choice, one that goes to the heart of what it means to be a Jedi. The Clone Wars had revealed a fundamental flaw in the Jedi Order's approach to the Force and their role in the galaxy. For 1,000 generations, the Jedi had been the guardians of peace and justice, but they'd also become enforcers for the Republic, military leaders, political figures. They'd lost touch with their spiritual roots and become too entangled in the affairs of the galaxy. Remember Qui-Gon Jinn's philosophy? The ability to speak does not make you intelligent. He understood that the Force had its own will, its own plan, and that sometimes the wisest action was to trust in that plan, rather than trying to control events. After his death, Qui-Gon learned to maintain his consciousness in the Force, something the Jedi Council thought was impossible. He taught this technique to Yoda, who taught it to Obi-Wan. This wasn't just about becoming a Force ghost, it was about a completely different relationship with the Force itself. Obi-Wan's years in exile weren't just about hiding or protecting Luke, they were about rediscovering what it truly meant to be a Jedi. Away from the politics, away from the wars, away from the expectations. He could finally listen to the Force without distraction. And what did the Force tell him? Wait, watch, trust. The galaxy would be saved, but not through armies, not through battles, not through rebellion. It would be saved through love, sacrifice, and the return of the Chosen One to the light. This required a level of faith that few could maintain. It meant watching the galaxy suffer under Imperial rule, knowing he had the power to fight back, but choosing instead to trust in a larger plan, one he might not live to see completed. And then, after nearly 20 years of waiting, the moment arrives. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. But notice what triggers Obi-Wan's return to action. It's not a call from the Rebel Alliance or a military emergency. It's a message from Leia, Anakin's daughter, carried by R2-D2, delivered to Luke at exactly the moment when Luke was ready to begin his journey. The timing is perfect, in ways that go beyond coincidence. The Death Star plans, the Empire's greatest weakness, fall into Rebel hands, just as Luke comes of age. The Empire's superweapon is completed, just as the person destined to destroy it is ready to begin training. And when Obi-Wan finally reveals himself to the Empire, it's not to lead a rebellion, it's to sacrifice himself, in a way that will inspire Luke and give him the strength he needs for the trials ahead. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. This isn't a threat, it's a promise. By dying, Obi-Wan becomes exactly what Luke needs. Not a living mentor who might be captured or killed at a crucial moment, but a spiritual guide who can offer wisdom without the constraints of physical existence. As a Force ghost, Obi-Wan can guide Luke through the most dangerous parts of his journey, the training on Dagobah, the revelation about Vader, the final confrontation with the Emperor. He becomes the perfect teacher, present when needed, absent when Luke must learn independence. So why didn't Obi-Wan join the Rebel Alliance? Because he understood something that nobody else did. The Empire wasn't going to be defeated by military might. It was going to be defeated by love. Luke's refusal to kill his father, his willingness to die rather than turn to the dark side, his faith in the good that still existed in Anakin Skywalker, none of that would have been possible if Obi-Wan had spent 20 years fighting a conventional war. The Rebel Alliance provided the framework for victory, but the victory itself came through the fulfillment of the prophecy, the return of the Chosen One, and the elimination of the Sith, all of which required Obi-Wan to make the hardest choice a hero can make, to step back and let someone else be the hero. In the end, Obi-Wan Kenobi didn't abandon the galaxy in its darkest hour. He saved it, in the only way it could be saved, through patience, sacrifice, and an unwavering faith in the Force. And that, my friends, is why he will always be remembered not just as a great Jedi, but as the one who understood that sometimes the greatest victory requires the greatest restraint. What do you think? Was Obi-Wan right to stay hidden, or should he have joined the fight earlier? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the Star Wars